Qatar's neutrality between Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United States is not an accident of geography, but the product of history, economics, and survival strategy. To understand it, one must start with Qatar's position on the map, a small peninsula jutting into the Persian Gulf, with Iran across the water to the north, Saudi Arabia to the south, and the US. Navy's 5th Fleet just across the water in Bahrain. Surrounded by powers much larger than itself, Qatar has long relied on diplomacy to balance competing interests. In the early 20th century, Qatar was a British protectorate. The British Navy guaranteed security in exchange for control of Qatar's foreign policy. When Britain withdrew from the Gulf in 1971, Qatar declared independence. From that moment, its rulers, the Al Thani family, faced the challenge of survival in a region dominated by Saudi Arabia and Iran, both of which had claims to leadership of the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, in particular, saw Qatar as a natural extension of its own influence and expected compliance with its policies. But Qatar's leaders resisted complete alignment. In the 1990s, after Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani deposed his father in a bloodless coup in 1995, Qatar began charting a more independent course. It launched Al Jazeera in 1996, a satellite news channel that quickly irritated Saudi Arabia and other Arab governments by airing dissenting voices. This act alone symbolized Qatar's willingness to carve its own identity distinct from Riyadh's expectations. The bedrock of Qatar's independence, however, was natural gas. In the late 20th century, Qatar discovered it shared with Iran the world's largest natural gas field, the North Dome/South Pars field. This single deposit transformed Qatar's economy and strategic importance. By exporting liquefied natural gas, LNG, Qatar became one of the wealthiest states per capita in the world. Yet, this wealth was tied to cooperation with Iran because the two countries physically share the gas field. Hostility with Tehran could threaten the foundation of Qatar's prosperity. As a result, Doha maintained working relations with Iran, even as it hosted U.S. forces and remained a member of the Gulf Cooperation Council. The American connection dates to the 1990s. After the Gulf War of 1991, the U.S. sought reliable partners to maintain its military presence in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia had hosted American troops during the war, but soon asked them to leave under pressure from domestic opposition. Qatar seized the opportunity. In 2001, the United States signed a defense cooperation agreement with Qatar. The Al Udeid Air Base, built by Qatar at its own expense, became home to thousands of U.S. personnel. After 2003, when the U.S. invaded Iraq, Al Udeid became the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. This made Qatar indispensable to Washington's Gulf strategy. But the paradox was clear. Qatar relied on the U.S. military umbrella, yet it shared a vital energy lifeline with Iran, and it remained geographically tethered to Saudi Arabia. Balancing these relationships required constant maneuvering. Tensions with Saudi Arabia flared repeatedly. Riyadh expected Doha to follow its lead on issues like relations with Iran, Islamist movements, and regional diplomacy. Qatar resisted. For example, Qatar maintained ties with groups such as the Muslim Brotherhood, which Saudi Arabia and the UAE designated as terrorists. Qatar also opposed the 2003 Iraq War despite hosting U.S. operations. It sought to mediate in conflicts from Sudan to Lebanon, carving an image as a neutral broker rather than an obedient junior partner to Riyadh. The rift came to a head in June 2017 when Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed a blockade on Qatar, cutting diplomatic ties and closing borders. They accused Qatar of supporting terrorism, aligning with Iran, and undermining regional unity. For 3.5 years, Qatar endured the blockade, relying on air routes over Iran and supplies shipped from Turkey and elsewhere. Crucially, Qatar did not collapse. Its LNG exports continued, its population adjusted, and it strengthened economic ties with Iran and Turkey. The blockade demonstrated why neutrality mattered. Had Qatar chosen outright alignment with one side, it might not have survived. In January 2021, the blockade ended with the signing of the Al Ula Declaration in Saudi Arabia. Qatar emerged with its independence intact. It had not abandoned ties with Iran or the US. It had not silenced Al Jazeera. Instead, it proved that even under siege, it could sustain its neutral stance by leveraging its wealth, alliances, and global energy importance. Qatar's strategy is rooted in what scholars call hedging. It does not choose one camp but cultivates relations with all. With Iran, it shares gas and trade. With Saudi Arabia, it shares culture, tribal ties, and a common Gulf identity while resisting domination. With the US, it provides military bases and investment. This balancing act allows Qatar to deter threats without becoming the satellite of any one power. The approach was visible again in 2021 during the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. Qatar mediated talks between the US and the Taliban, hosted negotiations in Doha, and then played a critical role in evacuating civilians during the fall of Kabul. Washington publicly recognized Qatar as a major non-NATO ally. At the same time, Qatar continued its diplomatic channels with Iran, including hosting indirect talks between Tehran and Washington over the nuclear issue. Few countries could host both the Taliban and US generals or Iranian envoys and Saudi diplomats under the same roof. Qatar could because of its cultivated neutrality. This neutrality is not without risk. Saudi Arabia remains wary of Qatar's independence. Iran could one day seek to exert leverage over the shared gas field. The US, though a protector, could shift priorities as it has with other allies. Yet Qatar's rulers appear to believe that playing all sides is safer than choosing one. Its wealth funds this policy, and its history of survival amid regional rivalries sustains it. Qatar's neutrality is therefore not a luxury but a necessity. It is the strategy of a small state living in the shadow of giants. The ability to balance Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the US has kept Qatar secure, prosperous, and relevant far beyond its size. It is a policy born of geography, sustained by energy wealth, and reinforced by a consistent refusal to be absorbed into the orbit of any single power.